You think you know people, until you see what they do when they believe no one is watching. The voice of the narrator breaks the silence, heavy with both curiosity and anticipation. The story begins inside the grand estate of Victor Harland, a billionaire known for his ruthless business acumen and equally infamous arrogance. Victor had built an empire out of steel and glass. But behind the polished walls of his fortune, there was a man who rarely trusted anyone. He had lost faith in loyalty long ago, convinced that everyone wanted something from him: money, connections, or influence. It was during a late summer evening, when the cicadas hummed beyond the tall, ornate windows, that Victor made a decision that would forever change the way he saw the people in his home. He was not a man who cared about the chatter of his staff. They came and went, invisible, performing their duties like clockwork. But there was one employee who caught his eye, not because she wanted to, but because of how quietly she moved through his world. Her name was Angela. Angela was a black woman in her early 30s, tall with a graceful posture that betrayed both strength and weariness. She had been working as a maid in Victor's mansion for nearly 2 years, always polite, always steady, and never once crossing the thin line of formality. Yet Victor noticed something unusual. Angela never lingered, never laughed at gossip, never asked for anything extra. She simply worked and left. Most billionaires wouldn't think twice about her. But Victor, with his suspicious nature, began to wonder what she was hiding. One night, Victor decided to put Angela to the test. Rumors had reached him that her young son, Caleb, sometimes accompanied her to work when she had no one to watch him. For Victor, this was unacceptable. His mansion was no place for children, and he despised the thought of someone breaking his strict rules. But instead of confronting her directly, he chose a crueler path. He would pretend to fall asleep on the lounge sofa and wait to see what Angela's child would do. The night was still. A chandelier hung like a frozen galaxy above the vast living room. Victor stretched across the velvet sofa, his breathing slow, eyes closed just enough to see without being seen. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish from Angela's diligent cleaning. He waited, every tick of the grandfather clock dragging like a test of his own patience. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a small figure slip quietly into the room. Caleb, no older than 10. The boy carried himself with a mixture of shyness and quiet determination. His clothes were clean but modest, his shoes scuffed from running on streets rather than carpets. He glanced around the grand room as though it were a world not meant for him: gold-framed paintings, marble pillars, and the giant man he thought was asleep. Victor held his breath, his suspicion sharpening. Children, he believed, were curious by nature. Surely the boy would touch something he shouldn't, pocket something shiny, or sneak food from the gilded tray nearby. That was human nature, Victor told himself. That was what he expected from someone raised with little. He braced himself for the confirmation of his cynicism. But Caleb didn't move toward the treasures. Instead, he walked toward the side table where a stack of Victor's books lay. The boy hesitated, then reached for one carefully, almost reverently. It was heavy, a leather-bound classic about history and the struggles of people long forgotten. Caleb sat on the floor, crossed his legs, and began to read under the dim glow of the lamp. His lips moved silently, tracing the words with a finger, his small brow furrowed with concentration. Victor's chest tightened. He had expected greed, maybe even mischief, but what he saw was hunger. Not for wealth, not for trinkets, but for knowledge. The boy flipped pages with the kind of care only a child raised with respect for things he did not own could show. Every so often he glanced at his mother, who entered the room moments later, carrying a basket of fresh linen. Angela stopped dead in her tracks when she saw her son. Her eyes widened, fear flashing through them as though she had been caught in a crime. She hurried over, whispering harshly, "Caleb, what are you doing here? You know you're not supposed to wander." But Caleb, clutching the book to his chest, whispered back, "Mama, I just wanted to read. I didn't touch nothing else, I promise." Angela's face softened. She glanced toward the sofa, making sure Victor was still asleep. She lowered herself beside her son, smoothing his hair. "Baby, you can't be in here. If Mr. Harland finds you, we'll lose everything. Do you understand?" "Everything." Caleb looked down, ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mama, I want to learn. You always said knowledge is something no one can take away." Angela's eyes welled with tears. She pressed a finger to her lips, urging him to silence. Then with a trembling hand, she guided him toward the hallway. But before they left, she turned back. casting one last glance at the man on the sofa. Her expression was a mix of fear and defiance, as if she dared the world to judge her for raising a boy who wanted more than what life had given him. Victor lay frozen, his heart pounding. He had pretended to sleep in order to catch a thief, a liar, or at least a careless child. Instead, he had witnessed dignity in its purest form, a boy who respected what was not his, a mother who carried the weight of survival with pride, and a truth he had never considered. Not all struggles were born of laziness or greed. Some were born of circumstance, and within them lived a quiet kind of nobility. But Victor's pride and suspicion did not let him rise and speak. Not yet. He remained still, processing what he had seen. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt small inside his own mansion. The boy's simple act had cracked open something Victor had buried long ago, a memory of his own childhood, when he too had craved books more than toys, wisdom more than wealth. And as Angela led her son away, Victor's throat tightened with something he refused to name. The test he had set for them was meant to expose weakness. Instead, it revealed strength. But strength, he knew, had a way of challenging power. And Victor Harlan, the man who trusted no one, now faced a truth he could no longer ignore. The night after witnessing Angela and her son, Victor Harlan found himself restless. Sleep did not come easily to him, not because of business worries or corporate rivalries, things he usually thrived on, but because of the image of that boy sitting cross-legged on the floor, cradling a book as if it were treasure. The billionaire had built skyscrapers and factories, had dined with presidents and kings, yet the sight of a child yearning for words weighed heavier than all his conquests. By morning, he convinced himself it was merely curiosity. Children act sweet in front of their parents, he muttered to his reflection in the mirror. Angela probably put him up to it. A trick, a performance. That was the voice of the man who trusted no one. But another voice, a quieter, almost forgotten one, whispered that what he saw was genuine. That whisper unsettled him more than any business deal gone wrong. The following day, Victor called Angela into his study. She entered cautiously, her uniform immaculate, her posture rigid with the discipline of someone who could not afford a single mistake. "You've been working here 2 years," Victor began, his tone measured. "And in that time, you've never once asked for a raise, never requested days off, never caused trouble. Why?" Angela clasped her hands together, eyes fixed on the polished wood of his desk. "Sir, I am grateful for steady work." "That is enough." Victor leaned back, scrutinizing her. "Grateful? Or afraid?" Her jaw tightened, but she remained silent. "Tell me about your son," he pressed. For a moment, her composure cracked. She lifted her eyes to his, wary but unflinching. "Caleb is everything. Smart, curious, too curious sometimes. He wants to learn, to read. I do what I can, but book schools, they cost more than I make cleaning houses." She hesitated, then added, "Still, I teach him not to take what isn't his, to respect what belongs to others. That is all I can give him until God provides more." Victor's fingers tapped the desk, his mind replaying the scene of Caleb gently turning the pages of his history book. Something about Angela's words pierced deeper than he expected, but his pride made him cloak empathy and skepticism. "And you bring him here sometimes against the rules," Victor said coldly. Angela inhaled sharply. "Only when I have no choice. Sir, I cannot leave him alone. The neighborhood is not safe. I thought, if he stayed in a corner quietly, he would cause no harm." Victor stood, walking slowly toward the window. Beyond the glass stretched manicured gardens, fountains, and marble statues. Yet inside the silence of that room, the wealth felt hollow. "You think I don't see? You think I don't notice?" he said at last, his voice low but firm. "I saw your boy last night. I pretended to sleep and I saw him." Angela's face paled. Her hands trembled, though she fought to keep her voice steady. "Please, sir, don't punish him. It was my mistake. Fire me if you must, but don't hold it against Caleb. He's just a child." Her words carried no self-pity, only fierce protection. In that moment, Victor realized something rare. Angela was not begging for herself. She was standing guard for her son's dignity. He turned, studying her. "Do you know what I expected? I thought he would steal, break something, misbehave. But he didn't. He sat on the floor with a book. A book, Angela." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she swallowed them back. "That's all he's ever wanted, sir. To learn." The room hung in silence. For the first time in years, Victor felt the weight of his own prejudices. The assumptions he carried like armor. He had judged Angela and her child before truly seeing them. "You may go," he said at last, waving her away. His tone was flat, hiding the storm inside. That night, Victor wandered the halls of his mansion. The portraits of his ancestors looked down at him, stern and silent. He remembered his own childhood, his father working late into the night, his mother reminding him that knowledge, not money, was the true inheritance. He remembered sneaking into libraries, devouring books the way other children devoured sweets. Somewhere along the path to billions, he had buried that boy inside himself. Days passed. Victor observed Angela and Caleb quietly. Whenever the boy came, he noticed how carefully Angela kept him close, how Caleb never touched a thing without permission. Yet whenever his eyes found a shelf of books, they lingered with longing. One evening, Victor made a decision. He summoned Angela once more, but this time his voice carried less steel. "Bring your son tomorrow," he said. Angela froze. "Sir?" I said, "Bring him. I want him here." Confused but obedient, Angela agreed. The next day, Caleb entered the mansion with wide, uncertain eyes. Victor greeted him not as an employer, but as a man attempting to bridge two worlds. He placed a thick book on the table. "This is for you," Victor said. Caleb hesitated, glancing at his mother. Angela nodded gently. The boy reached for the book, his small hands trembling as he opened the first page. Victor watched him, something unfamiliar swelling in his chest. "You like to read?" "Yes, sir," Caleb whispered. "Mama says books are windows. I want to see the world through them." For a moment, Victor could not speak. Those words, simple yet profound, struck him with more force than any corporate deal. He saw not just a child, but a seed of possibility. A life that could flourish if only given water and light. From that day on, Victor made space for Caleb in his library. He hired a tutor, arranged for better schooling, and quietly ensured that Angela never again feared losing her job. But more than material gifts, he offered something rarer: acknowledgement. Yet the transformation was not one-sided. Through Angela's dignity and Caleb's hunger for learning, Victor confronted his own blindness. He realized how easily wealth could build walls, how prejudice could distort perception, and he realized that true wealth was not measured in accounts or estates, but in the courage to see humanity where others chose to look away. Months later, at a gathering in his mansion, Victor introduced Caleb and Angela to his wealthy peers. Whispers rippled through the crowd, curiosity, judgment, even disapproval. A black maid and her son standing beside the billionaire? It defied their expectations. But Victor silenced them with a single sentence. "This boy reminds me of who I once was, and his mother reminds me of what dignity truly looks like." The room fell quiet. For once, wealth had no answer. Angela lowered her head, overwhelmed with emotion. Caleb clutched the book Victor had given him, his eyes shining with dreams far bigger than the mansion's walls. The story of that night, when a billionaire pretended to sleep and instead awoke to his own humanity, would remain untold to the world. But within those walls, lives had been altered. A mother stood taller, a child reached higher, and a man rediscovered the truth he had long forgotten: that dignity cannot be bought, that justice lives not in grand gestures but in small recognitions, and that sometimes the greatest test is not of others but of ourselves.